The air in the valley was still when the SEAL team slipped through the jagged rocks under the fading cover of night. Moonlight reflected off patches of snow clinging to higher ridges, and the silence was broken only by the crunch of boots on gravel. For a brief moment, it felt like the calm before a storm, too quiet, too perfect. Lieutenant Harris checked his wrist, glancing at the glowing green face of his watch. 500 hours, right on schedule. The mission was straightforward, at least on paper. Infiltrate the valley, extract a captured informant who had critical intelligence about Taliban supply lines, and exfil before sunrise. Simple, Harris thought, though he knew in his gut that no mission in this part of Afghanistan was ever simple. The team moved like shadows, each man blending into the jagged landscape. Ramirez, the youngest of the group, carried the breaching kit. Ortega kept his saw at the ready, his silhouette bulky beneath the heavy ammo load. Doc Miller, the medic, kept glancing at the cliffs above as if expecting eyes to stare back. Every man was seasoned, yet each knew the valley had a reputation. Soldiers had a name for it, the Valley of No Return. Units that entered often came out torn apart or not at all. As they neared the small mud compound where the informant was being held, the radio crackled with a faint burst of static. Harris froze. Radios weren't supposed to crackle unless someone was near someone broadcasting or jamming. He motioned for the team to get low. The SEALs dropped, weapons up, scanning the horizon. That's when the first shot rang out. A round snapped past Harris's ear and smacked into the rock behind him, showering him with dust. More gunfire erupted from the ridges, muzzle flashes blinking like fireflies in the darkness. The valley exploded into chaos. Fighters poured from caves and gullies, their voices shouting in Pashto, rifles barking. Harris's heart slammed in his chest. They weren't supposed to be here. Not this many, not this prepared. Ambush! Ramirez shouted, firing controlled bursts toward the ridge. Ortega let the soul roar, laying down suppressive fire as tracers lit the night sky. But for every enemy they pinned, two more appeared. They weren't dealing with a handful of sentries. They were surrounded. Bullets kicked up dirt around them. Sparks flew as rounds chewed into rocks. The team dived behind a boulder barely wide enough to provide cover. Harris counted silhouettes in the distance, dozens of them, all moving in coordinated lines, cutting off any chance of escape. "Command, this is Viper 1, Harris barked into the radio. "We're compromised. Heavy contact. Need immediate." QRF. Static. Then a broken reply. "Too far outhold position." His stomach dropped. Reinforcements were hours away. They'd never last that long. "Ammo check," Harris shouted. The responses came back grim. Each man had less than 6 magazines. Against this many fighters, it was nothing. A mortar round landed 50 feet away, blasting a crater into the valley floor. The shockwave threw Ramirez onto his back, ears ringing. Doc Miller dragged him behind the rock, patting him down quickly. No injuries, just rattled, but the next round might not miss. The SEALs returned fire, disciplined and precise. Years of training kicked in, every movement automatic. Harris squeezed off rounds, dropping targets when they exposed themselves. Yet for every fighter that fell, 3 more seemed to appear, flooding the ridgeline, pouring into the valley. The odds were crushing. Time slowed in Harris's mind. He thought of the mission brief, the sterile words on paper that hadn't warned of this nightmare. He thought of his family back home, faces he might never see again. But most of all, he thought of his men, every one of them relying on him to find the way out. Rounds cracked inches above their heads. One ricocheted off Ortega's helmet, knocking him sideways. He cursed, shook it off, and went back to firing. But the reality was brutal. One lucky shot, and any of them could be gone. Then, just when despair began to set in, it happened. A single distant rifle crack cut through the storm. Clean, sharp, different. On the ridge, one of the enemy fighters jerked violently and dropped. The SEALs froze, blinking in disbelief. That shot hadn't come from them. Before they could process, another crack echoed. Another hostile crumpled. Then another. The SEALs exchanged stunned looks. None of them had a sniper rifle. None of them had line of sight from that angle. Whoever it was, they weren't part of. Harris's team. Who the hell? Ramirez muttered, eyes wide. The gunfire from the ridges faltered. The enemy began hesitating, ducking low, scanning the cliffs nervously. The precision was undeniable. Whoever the shooter was, they weren't spraying rounds wildly. They were picking targets with deadly cover. Harris's heart pounded. An ally? Impossible. Command had confirmed no overwatch in this sector. Could it be a rival militia? A lone wolf? Or worse, someone playing their own game entirely? But questions didn't matter. The result did, and the result was survival. The enemy began to splinter. Fighters who had charged confidently minutes ago were now crawling behind rocks, terrified of exposing themselves. The hidden sniper fired again, each shot echoing like a hammer strike, and with every kill, the SEALs' chances of living ticked. Upward, whoever it is, Harris muttered under his breath. They just bought us time. The SEALs regrouped, dragging their wounded deeper into cover. Harris forced himself to focus. The battlefield had shifted, but they weren't safe. Not yet, not even close. As another enemy fell to the unseen rifle, Harris raised his binoculars, scanning the ridges for any sign of their mysterious savior. All he caught was a flicker of movement, just a shadow melting into the rocks. The shooter was too good. Professional, controlled, almost surgical. For the first time since the ambush began, Harris felt a surge of hope. They were still surrounded, still outnumbered. But now, somewhere out there, a ghost was hunting alongside them. The valley was no longer just a death trap. It was a chessboard. And someone had just joined the game. The valley air hung heavy with smoke, dust, and the acrid tang of spent gunpowder. The SEALs had shifted behind a craggy outcrop, but the ambush hadn't relented. Enemy fighters continued to swarm the ridges, their shouts cutting through the chaos, signaling reinforcements to flank the SEALs' position. Every instinct screamed danger, every heartbeat measured in frantic beats. Yet the mysterious sniper, the ghost who had arrived without warning, was rewriting the battle. Harris crouched low, scanning through binoculars. He tried to catch the glint of glass or the movement of a rifle, anything that would reveal the shooter's location. A shadow flickered against the rock face, a momentary shimmer, but when he blinked, it vanished. The shots that followed were precise, deliberate, surgical. They weren't rapid fire. They weren't panicked. Every shot dropped a fighter exactly where the sniper intended. Ramirez, still trembling from the shock, whispered, How is someone doing that? No human could. Harris cut him off with a sharp gesture. Focus. Watch the movement. Keep your head down and don't waste ammo. Whoever she is, she's buying us time. The term she hung unspoken, but it was the only explanation. A smaller frame, a sharp precision. It didn't match the typical image of a heavy-built soldier with a sniper rifle. And the rhythm. The rhythm was controlled, calm, almost artistic. Ortega grunted, firing his saw over the outcrop, bullets kicking up rock dust. She's good, he said, eyes narrowing as another enemy fighter fell. Better than good. Professional. Way better than anyone we've seen in the field. Miller, the medic, scanned the injured team members, checking vitals. If she's on our side, he muttered, we might make it out alive. The SEAL's immediate concern shifted from panic to survival strategy. They realized that the sniper's presence was both a blessing and a puzzle. No one on the team had ever seen her. No one knew her name. No one had coordinated this attack. And yet, she was controlling the battlefield with a kind of skill that only came from years of experience. The enemy fighters, once confident, began to falter. Some glanced nervously at each other, then at the cliffs above. Their advance slowed. Confusion rippled through the ranks. The sniper's methodical precision forced them to question their footing, their safety, their very presence in the valley. Every time one of their leaders fell, the chain of command weakened. Harris signaled the team to move, pointing toward a small hollow 50 meters downhill. "We can reposition here. Cover fire from whoever is up there. Move fast, move low." The SEALs dashed for cover, rolling behind boulders and shallow depressions, bullets whistling overhead. The hidden sniper continued firing, each round measured, each target eliminated before it could react. Harris felt an unusual surge, awe an ally whose existence defied all logic and yet was undeniably real. They reached the hollow, momentarily safe. Harris crouched, catching his breath, and surveyed the battlefield. Enemy fighters were retreating from the ridge in small pockets, dragging their wounded. Others were pinned down behind rocks, hesitant to expose themselves. And still, the mysterious shooter worked silently, invisibly, controlling the chaos. "Look at her," Ramirez said, eyes wide. She's rewriting the fight." Harris didn't answer immediately. His mind was racing, not just analyzing the tactical situation, but trying to understand the human element. Who was she? Why intervene? Why risk her life to save a dozen SEALs she didn't know? Then another shot rang out, closer this time. Harris's. Binoculars caught a fleeting silhouette. Long hair tucked under a ragged cap, delicate frame, moving gracefully from one outcrop to another, rifle pressed to her shoulder. Her movements were almost invisible to the untrained eye, yet deadly to anyone in the open. The rhythm of the rifle was hypnotic, a deadly dance that only the most skilled sniper could master. "She's not supposed to exist," Harris whispered. To himself. The SEALs repositioned, taking advantage of the cover she provided. They pressed forward cautiously, every movement deliberate, every shot calculated. The enemy's morale was collapsing, yet they refused to retreat fully, desperately, clinging to what control they had left. Harris raised his radio. Viper 1 to command. "Confirm. Any sniper support in this sector?" Static, then a clipped, unsure voice. "Negative. No allied sniper teams reported." "What are you seeing?" Harris exhaled slowly, frustration and disbelief mixing. "We're being covered by someone highly skilled. Not reported by command." Silence on the other end. No one had answers. Harris closed the radio and tucked it back into his vest. Answers wouldn't matter right now. Survival would. The hidden sniper continued, moving silently across the ridge. Each shot dropped enemies in key positions, creating a corridor for the SEALs to advance. Harris signaled the team to push forward, cautiously moving through small depressions and over rocks. Every man was tense, aware that a single mistake could mean death. "Eyes on the ridge," Ramirez muttered, voice trembling. She's still there." Harris allowed himself a brief glance. Yes, there she was. Small, almost fragile looking, yet radiating lethal precision. Each time she shifted position, she maintained perfect concealment. Not once did she reveal herself to the SEALs or the enemy. Not once did she falter. The team's momentum grew. Encouraged by her support, they advanced steadily, clearing small pockets of enemy fighters and consolidating their position. The hidden sniper created the openings, neutralized threats, and dictated the tempo of the battlefield. Every step forward was orchestrated by her unseen hand. Hours seemed to stretch like days. The sun began to rise, casting orange streaks across the valley. Dust and smoke swirled in the light, making the battlefield surreal, almost dreamlike. Yet death had been close, breathing down their necks. And still, she was there, unseen, controlling the chaos like a phantom general. The SEALs finally reached a small plateau, giving them a better vantage point and slightly more defensible position. Harris took stock. The team was battered, bruised, but alive. Injuries were mostly minor scratches, ricochet grazes, but morale was renewed. They owed it all to the ghost sniper. Whoever she was, she had saved them from impossible odds. Ortega wiped sweat and blood from his brow. I've never seen anything like this. Precision, patience, control. She's not human. Harris nodded, eyes still scanning the ridge. We don't know who she is. We don't know why she's here. But we do know one thing. We're alive because of her. The enemy fighters were now disorganized, their advance broken. Some tried to regroup, but fear had taken hold. The phantom sniper's presence had shifted the tide. The SEALs realized that this battle, once seemingly unwinnable, was now in their favor. Not through sheer numbers or firepower, but through the invisible hand guiding their survival. Another series of precise shots rang out, and the remaining hostiles retreated further, disappearing into gullies and caves. The valley echoed with distant gunfire, but the immediate threat had diminished. Harris lowered his binoculars, letting out a slow breath. He knew that at any moment, the battle could flare again, but for now, they had a chance to live. And as he looked toward the ridge, he glimpsed the shadow again, a flicker, a movement, a reminder that the phantom sniper was still watching, still protecting, still untouchable. For the first time since the ambush began, hope replaced fear. They weren't alone, and survival, against impossible odds, was within reach. The valley had settled into a tense quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that screamed danger. Every SEAL in Harris's team knew that silence didn't mean safety. It meant waiting. Waiting for the next round to tear through rock or flesh. Hidden Sniper, the ghostly protector perched somewhere along the ridgeline, had shifted the battle in their favor, but they couldn't afford to assume victory yet. Harris scanned the horizon through his binoculars, catching only glimpses of movement, a shadow against a boulder, a flash of metal. It wasn't enough to pinpoint the sniper's location, but it was enough to make him cautious, aware, and grateful. Each precise shot from the unseen shooter forced enemy fighters to scatter, exposing themselves to the SEAL's suppressive fire. Ramirez, still shaken from the initial ambush, peeked over the rock. "How is she so perfect?" he whispered. "She's like she knows what's going to happen before it happens." Harris's jaw tightened. He didn't answer, only motioned for the team to move forward in tight formation. Every man's eyes flicked toward the ridge above, wary of a potential double-cross or misfire. But every calculated shot from the unseen sniper proved her allegiance and her skill. The team advanced cautiously across the valley floor, moving from boulder to boulder, each man counting their steps, each round fired measured to conserve ammo. The enemy, once confident and organized, had now descended into chaos. Fighters screamed orders at each other, gesturing frantically as the invisible sniper picked them off one by one. Their morale was crumbling under the psychological weight of a deadly, unseen opponent. Then another shot rang out, dropping an enemy fighter who had been poised to flank the SEALs. Harris froze, holding his breath, watching the soldier's body crumple. He realized that the sniper's precision wasn't just tactical, it was surgical. Each shot was aimed to disrupt command, to create gaps, to protect the SEALs. Whoever she was orchestrating the battlefield with a mastery that rivaled any professional unit. "Look at her," Ortega muttered, peering toward the ridge with wide eyes. "She's not just surviving, she's controlling everything." Miller, crouched beside him, nodded grimly. "She's buying us every second we need. If she disappears, we die." The SEALs moved forward again, using the tiny advantages the sniper had created. Every shot she fired seemed to communicate a pattern. Take cover, move here, watch for that enemy. Harris realized they were almost dancing to her rhythm, each motion choreographed by the invisible hand guiding the bullets above. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The enemy fighters were disoriented, panicked, and desperate. Their coordinated lines had broken down into small clusters, hiding behind rocks, calling for reinforcements that would never come. The hidden sniper, perched somewhere high on the ridge, was dictating the pace of survival. Her presence was unseen but unmistakable, her influence undeniable. Harris's thoughts drifted briefly to speculation. Who was she? How had she learned to survive in these mountains with such skill? Had she grown up in these valleys, learning every rock and shadow? Or was she trained professionally, a ghost who had gone off the books? None of that mattered. What mattered was that she had chosen to intervene, and her choice had saved them from almost certain death. Suddenly, a shot whistled close, ricocheting off the rock next to Ramirez. The SEALs dove low, adrenaline surging. The sniper, as if sensing the danger, fired again, taking out the shooter who had been closest. Ramirez barely lifted his head to see the enemy fall. "She's incredible," he muttered, voice trembling. "Incredible." Ortega glanced at Harris. "We need to push forward. Every second we stay here, more of them regroup, and we're dead." Harris nodded. "We move on my signal. Cover your angles, and trust our ghost. She hasn't missed yet, and she won't." The SEALs crept forward, the ground uneven and treacherous, each footstep a potential death sentence. Dust kicked up with every movement, but the sniper adjusted her aim with every shift in terrain. She was everywhere and nowhere, her shots punctuating the valley like a grim symphony. As they advanced, Harris caught a faint silhouette moving along a ridge. Just for a heartbeat. Small, precise, deliberate. The frame was slight, almost unassuming, but the way she carried herself radiated lethal confidence. She wasn't just surviving. She was dominating the battlefield with quiet elegance. The enemy tried to flank them, attempting to gain high ground on the opposite ridge. Before they could organize, the hidden sniper struck. 2 fighters went down before they even fired a shot. Chaos erupted among the attackers. The SEALs used the confusion to move to a more defensible position, rocks providing cover and line of sight to the valley floor. Harris signaled to Ramirez, and Ortega to provide suppressive fire while he checked the horizon. "We're not clear yet, but we're alive because of her," he muttered. The sniper's rhythm never faltered. Each shot was calculated to weaken the enemy's morale. Leaders fell first, then soldiers in strategic positions, forcing the remainder to scatter. Harris realized she was using battlefield psychology as much as marksmanship. Every strike had intent. Every movement had purpose. She was more than a shooter. She was a strategist operating from the shadows. Hours passed, though time had lost all meaning. Sweat, dust, and fear coated the SEALs, but their spirits remained tethered to the invisible force protecting them. The sniper never revealed herself, never glanced in their direction. Yet each life-saving shot reaffirmed her presence. At one point, Harris allowed himself a closer look through the binoculars. There she was again, a flash of motion, long hair, tucked under a ragged cap, movements fluid and deliberate. Her frame was small, almost fragile, yet she radiated control. The rifle never wavered. She fired, repositioned, fired again. The enemy was helpless, every advance thwarted before it began. She's not just a ghost, Harris whispered to himself. She's a master. The SEALs pressed on, making slow progress toward the valley's center. The hidden sniper's influence allowed them to clear the field in tactical bursts. Every shot she fired bought them time. Every movement orchestrated their survival. They were no longer just surviving. They were reclaiming ground, inch by inch. Even as exhaustion set in, every man's focus sharpened. The rhythm of battle had shifted, guided by someone unseen, someone whose skill defied comprehension. Harris realized that their survival was no longer chance. It was being guided by this invisible hand. And she was precise, calculated, almost methodical. As the sun began to rise, casting gold and red streaks across the valley, the SEALs paused on a small plateau. Dust swirled around them, light glinting off spent cartridges and rocks. The sniper's rhythm continued, but from the shadows, they couldn't see her anymore. The valley, which had seemed a death trap, had become a battleground they were slowly mastering, all thanks to the ghostly guardian above. Harris exhaled slowly, letting the adrenaline drain slightly. "We're not out of danger yet," he said, voice low, "but we're alive, and that's because of her. Whoever she is, we owe her everything." Ramirez nodded, eyes still wide with disbelief. "She's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. And she's not even ours." Ortega smirked grimly. "Maybe that's better. Ghosts don't need orders. Ghosts just kill." Harris allowed himself a brief moment of admiration, knowing the danger was far from over, but also acknowledging a rare truth. Their unseen ally had turned an impossible fight into one they might survive. And for that, they would never forget. Her no name, no face, only the rhythm of her rifle and the shadow of her presence guiding them through hell. The morning sun crept over the jagged Afghan ridges, washing the valley in harsh light that revealed every shadow, every rock, every enemy hiding in the folds of the terrain. The SEALs had reached a narrow plateau, giving them a temporary defensive advantage. But Harris knew better than to think the battle was over. The hidden sniper, the ghost on the ridge, had kept them alive so far, yet neither her motives nor her identity were known. She was a stranger, and strangers with that level of skill were unpredictable. Harris crouched behind a boulder, scanning the valley with binoculars. Below, enemy fighters were regrouping in pockets, attempting to gain order but faltering under fear. Every now and then, a figure would jerk violently, struck by another unseen round from the ridge. Harris's chest tightened. The hidden sniper's precision had not waned. "She's everywhere and nowhere," Ramirez muttered, staring wide-eyed at the ridgeline. "She's saving us and scaring them into leaving." Ortega, always blunt, nodded grimly. "She's a ghost and a genius. That's why we're alive." The team pressed forward cautiously, using small depressions in the plateau as cover. Harris signaled them to move in a tight formation, rifles raised and eyes scanning every ridge and crevice. Their steps were careful, calculated. Every movement mattered. One misstep could turn a tactical advantage into a massacre. "Watch your angles," Harris said. "Keep moving, keep low, and trust the sniper. She's holding them off." Bullets cracked above them. Harris felt the vibrations through the rock beneath his hands. A Taliban fighter had tried to climb the plateau to gain an advantageous position, but hadn't made it 5 meters before a round hit him. The corpse slid down the rock slope. The SEALs froze for a moment, heartbeats sinking to the rhythm of the sniper's rifle. "She knows exactly what she's doing," Miller said, tightening his grip on his pistol. "She's not just shooting there. Learning fear." Hours passed. The SEALs advanced incrementally, reclaiming patches of territory. Every movement was choreographed, every suppressive fire coordinated, and all the while, The sniper on the ridge dictated the tempo. Harris caught glimpses of shadow in the rocks, her frame slight but deadly, shifting positions to maximize her. Field of fire. Who trains someone like that? Ramirez whispered. She's flawless. Harris didn't answer. He didn't need to. The proof was all around them. Enemy forces were breaking apart, panicking, running, retreating in fear of the unseen markswoman who had claimed the high ground as her own. She wasn't just defending the SEALs. She was orchestrating the battle, a ghostly general in control. Of death from above. Suddenly, a cluster of fighters attempted a flanking maneuver from the far ridge. They moved cautiously, hoping to avoid detection, but the sniper anticipated every motion. 2 fighters dropped before the SEALs even raised their weapons. Another ricochet cracked against the plateau, forcing the rest to halt mid-step. She's reading their movements before they even move, Ortega muttered. It's like she sees. Inside their heads. Harris allowed himself a rare glance at the ridge. The sun glinted off the scope for a fraction of a second. There she was, slender, fluid, completely composed under the chaos of gunfire and dust. Long hair tucked beneath a worn cap, rifle pressed firmly against her shoulder. She fired, shifted, and disappeared behind a rock, leaving the enemy scrambling blindly. The SEALs pressed forward again, using the openings she created. Every shot, every pause in the enemy advance, allowed them to inch closer to their original objective, the captured informant held in a crumbling mud compound near the center of the valley. As they advanced, the sniper's influence became more than just tactical. Harris realized she was saving them, but she was also guiding their movements indirectly. Every open path was clear because of her fire, every lethal threat neutralized in the nick of time. The SEALs were no longer simply surviving. They were maneuvering through the valley under her invisible guidance. Miller glanced at Harris. She's not just a sniper. She's controlling the battlefield. Yes, Harris replied quietly. And we have to follow her rhythm if we want to survive. The enemy tried regrouping near the valley floor. They shouted orders, gestured wildly, and attempted to re-establish control. But every leader who emerged from cover was cut down instantly by the phantom sniper. The valley erupted into chaos, a controlled nightmare orchestrated from above. Harris realized that the hidden shooter was not just an ally. She was the master of the fight. Hours dragged on. Dust stung their eyes, sweat soaked their uniforms, and fatigue gnawed at every muscle. Yet the SEALs pressed on, moving cautiously but steadily toward the mud compound. Every shot from the sniper gave them a moment to breathe, a moment to reposition, a moment to survive. Harris scanned the ridge once more. The sniper was constantly moving, staying just out of sight. He caught a brief silhouette shifting behind a raucous light, almost delicate frame, methodical, almost elegant in its precision, yet every motion radiated lethal intent. The sniper wasn't just a protector. She was a force, invisible yet omnipresent. She's human? Ramirez asked, voice barely above a whisper. Or something else? Harris shook his head. I don't know. I don't care. She's keeping us alive, and that's enough. The SEALs reached a small cluster of rocks. Near the mud compound, Harris peered over the top, assessing the enemy's positions. The hidden sniper had already softened the defenses. One by one, enemy fighters had been eliminated, their morale shattered by precise, terrifying shots from nowhere. The SEALs moved like shadows, taking advantage of every gap created, and the sniper fired again, this time closer. A Taliban fighter, who had been aiming at Harris's position, jerked violently, collapsing face-first into the dirt. The SEALs froze, watching the body twitch once before lying still. She's terrifying, Ramirez whispered, staring toward the ridge. She's our only reason we're alive. Ortega said grimly. "And if we survive this, we'll owe her our lives." The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning. Chill. The valley, once a potential death trap, was now an intricate battlefield controlled by a single unseen force. The SEALs pressed forward, inching closer to the informant's location. Each movement was synchronized with the rhythm of the sniper's rifle, every shot dictating when to pause, when to move, when to take cover. Harris realized that the sniper was more than a marksman. She was a tactician, a ghostly conductor orchestrating chaos with deadly precision. The SEALs moved not just for survival, but according to her unseen plan, trusting her instinct, her skill, and her lethal control of the battlefield. The enemy, broken and terrified, continued to fall into disarray. Those who survived the snipers. Wrath had lost all coordination, scattering in a panic that ensured the SEALs' advance remained uninterrupted. Harris glanced at his team, gritty, exhausted, but alive. And they would remain so only because of the shadow above. As they approached the compound, Harris realized something profound. The sniper was not just protecting them. She was shaping the battle itself. Every shot, every movement, every calculated pause had created the openings that allowed 12 men to inch closer to safety in a valley that should have claimed them all. Harris exhaled, feeling the tension drain slightly, though he knew the fight was far from over. They were alive for now. And above them, somewhere on the ridge, the ghost sniper continued her deadly rhythm, unseen, untouchable, perfect. The valley had become a fractured battlefield, littered with dust, spent cartridges, and the cries of the retreating enemy. Yet for the SEALs, the air felt electric, not from victory, but from the tension of surviving another day. The hidden sniper above continued her work, moving with the fluidity of a predator whose presence was felt but never seen. Harris crouched behind a jagged rock, sweating under the weight of his gear. Every muscle ached, every breath was heavy, and every heartbeat drummed a warning that the fight wasn't over. Yet he couldn't help stealing glances toward the ridge, hoping to catch even the faintest sign of their ghostly ally. Ramirez, still pale from the initial ambush, whispered, She's amazing. How can one person do all of this?" Ortega snorted. "One person? That's not just one person. That's someone born for this. Someone who lives in these mountains like a shadow and fights like a ghost." Miller, the medic, kept his eyes on the horizon, silently tallying injuries and praying no one else was hit. "I don't care who she is. If she disappears, we die." Harris nodded, acknowledging the truth. Every movement they made, every advance toward the mud compound, was guided by the sniper's unseen hand. Each opening, each pause, each elimination of a threat was choreographed with the precision of a master strategist. The team moved carefully, keeping low behind scattered boulders. Enemy fighters, fewer than before, were still attempting to regroup near the valley floor, but fear had overtaken discipline. Every time they rose to organize, a sharp shot from the ridge ended the effort. The sniper's rhythm was flawless, her timing perfect, her targeting devastating. Suddenly, Harris caught a movement on the ridge, a flash of motion that lingered just long enough to register. The silhouette of the sniper. Smaller than he had expected, slight in frame, yet each motion radiated lethal control. Long hair tucked under a ragged cap, rifle steady, breathing calm. She fired again, dropping an enemy poised to flank the SEALs. "She's a phantom," Harris whispered to himself. "Not just skilled, perfect." Ramirez leaned closer, binoculars trembling in his hands. "She's a woman?" Harris swallowed. He hadn't considered it, but the frame, the movements, the subtle grace all pointed to that possibility. A female sniper, operating alone, unseen, saving lives without revealing herself. It was almost impossible to comprehend. Doesn't matter, Harris muttered. She's on our side. That's enough. The team pressed forward, inching closer to the compound. The hidden sniper's influence was now almost psychological. She wasn't just shooting. She was guiding them, controlling their exposure, dictating the safest path through a valley filled with unseen threats. Every shot she fired bought the SEALs seconds. Every motion she made dictated where they could safely move. Hours passed. Sweat burned in their eyes. Dust coated their faces. And uniforms. Yet the sniper never faltered. She shifted positions frequently, each time firing with lethal accuracy, her rifle speaking a language of death that only she fully understood. Harris signaled a halt. From their vantage point, they could see the compound, a crumbling mud structure. Heavily guarded, but now chaotic, the enemy demoralized and scattered. The hidden sniper had softened the defenses in a way no direct assault could have achieved. The SEALs were finally close enough to execute the extraction. She's incredible, Ramirez breathed. I can't believe anyone can move like that and shoot like that at the same time. She's not human, Ortega said flatly, eyes never leaving the ridge. She's something else entirely. Miller adjusted his pack, keeping an eye on the wounded. Whatever she is, she's keeping us alive. And if she disappears now, the next few minutes could be fatal. Harris nodded. We're moving. Stick to the cover, watch the angles, and trust the sniper. She hasn't failed yet, and she won't. The SEALs advanced. Every boulder, every depression, every patch of terrain became part of a carefully coordinated movement guided by the cheat. Sniper's lethal intervention. Enemy fighters, terrified and disorganized, fell one by one, each shot from the ghost above, strategically eliminating threats before they could react. Harris's eyes caught her again. The phantom sniper, moving with a fluid grace that made her seem almost untouchable. Her rifle glinted briefly in the sunlight. She fired, repositioned, fired again. The enemy scrambled, shouting orders, gesturing wildly, but each attempt to regroup ended in chaos. She's controlling the battle, Harris said quietly. She's not just saving us, she's running this fight. Minutes stretched, then hours. The SEALs drew closer to the compound, moving in tight formation, every step dictated by the openings created by their unseen ally. The enemy, broken and demoralized, attempted desperate maneuvers, only to be struck down by the sniper's impeccable aim. Harris glanced at his team. Exhaustion painted their faces, but determination burned in their eyes. Each man knew that the phantom sniper above was the reason they were still alive. She had appeared from nowhere, with no warning, no allegiance, no claim of recognition, and yet she had saved them. Then, finally, Harris saw it, a shadowed movement close enough to recognize as deliberate, almost human in its familiarity. The sniper had shifted to a perch directly overlooking the compound, providing them the perfect cover for the final approach. Harris swallowed, heart hammering. She's giving us the window, he whispered. We move now. The SEALs advanced carefully, hugging the terrain, avoiding open patches where a single exposure could be deadly. The sniper fired again, removing the final threats from the perimeter. Harris felt his pulse synchronize with the rhythm of her shots, the cadence of death that had dictated the valley since sunrise. They reached the compound. Harris motioned for Ortega and Ramirez to cover the entrances while he moved toward the door. Bullets from the sniper's rifle continued to crack. Behind them, keeping enemy reinforcements at bay, the informant inside had no idea what miracle was unfolding outside. No idea that their extraction was being orchestrated by someone unseen, perfect, lethal. Harris threw open the door. Inside, the informant cowered, wide-eyed, fear etched into every line of his face. We're here, Harris said quickly. Move fast. Cover your head. you're coming with us." The SEALs moved the informant out, every step still synchronized with the sniper's invisible cover. Outside, the valley continued to echo with distant gunfire, the remnants of enemy resistance crumbling under her precision. Every moment they lingered, every step they took, was guided by the phantom sniper above. Finally, with the informant safely in their center, Harris allowed himself a glance up the ridge. The sniper had shifted again, crouched behind a rocky outcrop, rifle aimed, eyes focused, breathing controlled. She made no movement to signal, no gesture of acknowledgement, only continued to dominate the battlefield with absolute control. "She's incredible," Ramirez whispered again. "She's our only reason we're alive," Ortega said, voice low. No kidding. Harris felt a surge of respect and awe. Whoever she was, she had turned a death trap into an extraction zone, saved lives with surgical precision, and remained completely unseen. She wasn't just a sniper. She was a ghost, a master, a force of nature operating in silence. As the SEALs prepared to exfil from the valley, Harris realized something profound. They might never know her name, they might never understand her motives, and they might never meet her. Yet she had saved them. She had rewritten the odds, and for that, they would never forget her. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning chill, illuminating the battered valley. Dust swirled around the rocks, and the sounds of retreating enemies echoed faintly in the distance. The SEALs had survived, but survival had a name now, an unseen, untouchable name, whispered only in admiration and awe. The ghost on the ridge. Harris allowed himself a final glance before they moved toward extraction. The sniper had already vanished from sight, blending into the rocks, leaving behind only the rhythm of her rifle and the trail of lives she had saved. The SEALs carried that memory like armor, knowing that in the chaos of war, some allies existed beyond recognition, perfect, silent, deadly. And in that moment, Harris understood that survival was more than skill or strategy. Sometimes it required a ghost. The valley, now washed in the harsh light of mid-morning, had become a chaotic battlefield. Dust swirled in golden rays, mingling with the acrid scent of spent gunpowder. Enemy fighters, disoriented and terrified, were scattered across the rocky terrain. But the danger was far from over. The SEALs had rescued the informant, yet the threat of reinforcements loomed, and every movement through the valley still carried the risk of death. Harris crouched low, assessing the perimeter. "Stay close. Keep moving, eyes open." His voice was calm, but carried the urgency of someone who knew that a single mistake could cost lives. Ramirez glanced toward the ridge, searching for the Joe. "Phantom sniper. She's still up there?" he whispered. "I don't see her." Harris shook his head. "Doesn't matter. She's watching. She hasn't missed a shot yet. Trust her rhythm." The team advanced carefully, the informant sandwiched in the center. Bullets occasionally pinged off nearby rocks, remnants of enemy fighters, desperate to slow their progress. But with each shot, the sniper above reacted, eliminating threats before they could reach the SEALs. Her presence was unseen, but undeniably felt. Every movement they made, every inch they gained, was guided by her invisible hand. Ortega grunted. "I've never seen anything like this. She's not just shooting, she's controlling the battlefield." Harris allowed himself a brief glance upward, scanning the ridges for even the faintest shadow. There a flicker of movement among the rocks. A slight, almost delicate frame shifted, rifle poised, eyes locked on the enemy. Long hair tucked under a worn cap, posture calm, breathing controlled. She fired again, dropping an enemy poised to flank the SEALs. "She's terrifying," Ramirez muttered. "I've never seen anyone like her." "Yes," Harris said quietly. "And she's keeping us alive. Remember that." The SEALs pressed on, moving in tight formation, using every depression and rock as cover. The sniper continued her deadly rhythm above, her shots precise, deliberate, and terrifyingly efficient. Enemy fighters, fewer and more desperate, tried to regroup, but each attempt was met with lethal accuracy. Harris's eyes narrowed. The sniper was not only protecting them, but dictating their movements, guiding them through the valley with a precision that no team could replicate. Every step, every pause, every cover taken was choreographed by her invisible hand. Minutes stretched into hours. The SEALs advanced slowly, inching closer to the extraction point, each step a delicate dance with death. The sniper's rhythm dictated their pace, each shot a cue to move or halt, each elimination a lifeline. Then came the sound Harris had treaded a mortar round, fired from a distant ridge. The explosion rocked the ground beneath them, throwing dust, debris, and rocks into the air. Ramirez was thrown to the ground, coughing, ears ringing. "Medic!" Harris shouted. Miller scrambled to Ramirez's side, checking for injuries. "Scratches, nothing serious." "But we need to move." Ortega fired back toward the ridge, bullets whipping through the air. "She's got this," he shouted, eyes flicking toward the sniper's position. "She's controlling the entire battlefield." Harris nodded, signaling the team to continue their advance. The sniper's precision had kept the enemy off balance, and now, even with reinforcements attempting to regroup, the SEALs had the momentum. The phantom sniper moved again, shifting to a higher perch for better sightlines. Harris glimpsed her for a fraction of a second, a small frame, fluid movements, and an aura of lethal calm. She fired, taking out an enemy attempting to gain higher ground. The impact of her shots echoed across the valley, each one strategic, each one deadly. "She's saving us again," Ramirez whispered, awestruck. "I can't believe she's real." "She is real," Harris said, jaw tight. "And if she disappears, we die." The SEALs pressed forward, now mere meters from the extraction point. The sniper's rhythm continued, each shot orchestrating their path. Enemy fighters who had survived the initial ambush were now panicked, disorganized, and fearful. The valley had become a psychological battlefield as much as a physical one, every movement dictated by fear of the unseen woman above. Harris glanced at the informant. The man's eyes were wide with fear, sweat streaking his face. "Keep moving," Harris urged. "Almost there. Trust us. And trust her." Above, the sniper fired again, silencing another group of fighters attempting to flank the SEALs. She moved swiftly, repositioning behind rocks, always unseen, always precise. Her rifle's rhythm became a heartbeat, guiding the team through the chaos. Minutes later, the SEALs reached a narrow defile that led to the extraction zone. Harris signaled them to halt and assess the remaining threats. Enemy fighters were few, scattered, and terrified. The phantom sniper had done more than protect them. She had shattered the enemy's morale and dismantled their formations. "She's incredible," Ortega said quietly, reloading his rifle. "I've never seen anything like this in my life," Ramirez nodded. "I can't stop thinking about her. She's perfect." Harris's eyes flicked to the ridge one last time. The sniper's movements were almost imperceptible, a shadow melting into rocks. Long hair tucked under a ragged cap, rifle steady, breathing calm. She fired again, dropping the last enemy who posed a threat. Then she vanished. The valley fell silent, save for the SEALs' breathing and the distant retreat of the enemy. Harris allowed himself a long exhale, letting tension drain slowly. The team had survived an impossible ambush, rescued the informant, and made it to the extraction point, all because of an unseen ally whose skill defied comprehension. She saved us," Ramirez whispered, voice trembling. "I don't." know who she is, but she saved us all. Yes, Harris said quietly. She did, and we'll never forget it. A black hawk thundered into the valley, blades kicking up dust and rock. The SEALs secured the informant and loaded quickly. As the aircraft lifted off, Harris glanced once more toward the ridge. The sniper was gone. No flash, no silhouette, no trace. Only the memory of her precision, her rhythm, her deadly grace. Who was she? Ramirez asked, voice barely audible over the rotor wash. Doesn't matter, Harris said, eyes narrowing. At the fading ridges below, she chose to save us. That's all that matters. The SEALs settled into the Black Hawk, adrenaline still thrumming in their veins. Around them, the valley stretched wide and empty, littered with the remains of chaos, yet miraculously, all 12 of them were alive. And somewhere, above, unseen, the ghost sniper watched, vanished into the rocks as silently as she had appeared. Ortega smirked, shaking his head. I don't care what anyone says. That wasn't just luck. That was skill, talent, genius, and she's out there somewhere. Harris's eyes softened. A mix of awe and respect etched across his face. We'll never know her name, he murmured, but we'll remember her. Every single one of us. The helicopter climbed higher, the valley shrinking beneath them, and with every passing second, the SEALs realized the truth. Their survival wasn't just skill, training, or luck. It was the presence of a phantom, a master of death, a guardian, who had appeared when they were outnumbered, outgunned, and nearly doomed. And somewhere on that ridge, she waited silent, unseen, perfect. The Black Hawk sliced through the crisp mountain air, rotors beating a thunderous rhythm as it carried the SEALs and their rescued informant away from the valley of no return. Dust, debris, and the fading echoes of battle slipped behind them, swallowed by distance. Yet the adrenaline still coursed through every muscle of Harris's body, reminding him that the fight was far from ordinary. The informant, pale and shaking, was silent, eyes wide as he clutched his backpack. I didn't think anyone would make it, he muttered, voice barely audible above the rotor wash. Harris glanced at him, expression tight. We made it because of someone else, he said. Someone unseen. Someone who saved every one of us today. Ramirez, still trembling from exhaustion, shook his head in disbelief. She was incredible. I've never seen anything like it. Every shot, every move, she was perfect. Ortega smirked, leaning back against the helicopter wall. Perfect doesn't cover it. She was a ghost, a master, and now she's vanished, leaving us alive while the enemy scrambled. Miller, always the quiet observer, added softly, she didn't just save us, she controlled the battlefield. We owe her more than our lives. We owe her everything. Harris nodded, eyes scanning the receding valley below. Every detail of the ambush, every heartbeat of the battle, replayed in his mind. The sniper's unseen presence had shifted the tide entirely. No number of reinforcements, no strategy, could have replicated what she had done. Every shot had been surgical, deliberate, almost predictive. Command will never know, Harris said quietly, almost to himself. They'll see the kill count, the extraction, but they won't see her. They won't know she existed. Ramirez's voice was trembling. Do you think we'll ever see her again? Harris shook his head. Maybe not, but we'll remember her. Every shot, every movement, it was her rhythm guiding us. And that rhythm saved our lives. The helicopter banked, revealing the rugged mountains and winding valleys below. Harris could still picture the chaos. Enemy fighters scattered, morale shattered, precise rounds from above. A tiny frame of a woman moving like a shadow. She had been untouchable, untamed, and yet perfectly in control. Do we even know who she was? Ramirez asked. Afghan? American? Some off-the-books agent? No idea, Harris admitted. And it doesn't matter. Whoever she is, she chose to intervene. That's all that matters. As the Black Hawk neared their base, the team began preparing for the debrief. The informant was strapped into a secure seat, docile but still trembling. Harris's mind raced not with tactics this time, but with questions. Who was the sniper? Why had she intervened? And why had she vanished before they could make contact? At the base, the debrief was a mixture of protocol and disbelief. Command wanted details: enemy numbers, casualties, extraction times, but the SEALs found themselves recounting an element no one could officially verify: the phantom sniper who had saved them all. Harris leaned forward, voice low but steady. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. Then she appeared. Every shot she fired was precise, strategic, and deliberate. She moved like a shadow, striking before the enemy could react. She controlled the battlefield as she never revealed herself. She saved every one of us. The debrief officers exchanged skeptical glances. A sniper? Unidentified? Alone? One asked cautiously. Yes, Ortega said, voice firm. She was there, and she disappeared before we could contact her. There's no record, no intel, just precision, control, and lives saved. Ramirez shook his head. You had to see her. You had to feel the rhythm of her shots. She's not human. I've never witnessed anything like it. The officers scribbled notes, but Harris knew they couldn't grasp the truth. Command couldn't comprehend the impact of a single, unseen individual guiding an entire extraction from near certain death. The sniper had been a ghost in every sense, a shadow that protected, guided, and vanished without recognition. Later, in the quiet of the debriefing room, Harris leaned back, rubbing his face. His team was still processing the experience. The adrenaline had faded, leaving only awe, fatigue, and questions that had no answers. She didn't do it for you, S., Miller said quietly. She did it because she wanted to, because she could, and she did it perfectly. Harris nodded slowly. And that's why she'll always remain a ghost. No record, no accolades, no acknowledgement. Just perfect. The informant, now calmer, asked Harris about the sniper. Who saved us? He whispered. Harris hesitated, then shook his head. We'll never know her name, but she saved us. That's enough. Ramirez stared at the floor, still trembling from the intensity of the battle. I keep seeing her, moving across the rocks, firing, disappearing. She's not like anyone I've ever seen. I'll never forget her. Harris's eyes softened. He understood that feeling. They would all carry her memory, the phantom who had turned impossible odds into survival, who had orchestrated death from the shadows, who had vanished before they could thank her. She had been untouchable, flawless, and utterly unforgettable. Even as they left the base to rest, debrief, and recover, the image of her remained etched in their minds. The valley, once a nightmare, had been transformed by her presence. She had been invisible, lethal, perfect, and gone before they could comprehend the full measure of her skill. Ortega broke the silence, voice low and reverent. Somewhere, she's out there, watching, waiting, protecting. That's who she is. That's all we need to know. Harris exhaled slowly. We survived because of a ghost. And ghosts, they don't stay. They don't wait for thanks. They just do what needs to be done. Ramirez nodded, eyes distant. I'll never forget her, ever. Harris looked at his team, exhausted, battered, alive, and knew they all felt the same. The rhythm of the battle, the precision of her shots, the calm she brought to chaos, these would stay with them forever. She was a ghost in every sense, unseen, perfect, and utterly lethal. And somewhere, perhaps in another valley, another firefight, she would appear again. A phantom, guiding, protecting, unseen, her legacy, etched in the lives she saved, the battlefield she controlled, and the memory of those who survived because of her. Harris leaned back, closing his eyes for a brief moment. They had survived the valley of no return. They had been guided, protected, and ultimately saved by someone no one could identify. And that truth, stark and undeniable, would live with them forever. The ghost sniper had turned death into survival, and for that, she would remain unforgettable. The sun was beginning to set, painting the mountains in gold and crimson as the Black Hawk carried the SEALs and the informant to safety. Fatigue weighed heavily on each of them, but adrenaline still lingered, keeping their senses razor-sharp. Every man carried the imprint of the day, the chaos of ambush, the terror of being outnumbered, and above all, the memory of a phantom sniper whose unseen hand had saved them. Harris leaned back against the wall of the helicopter, eyes scanning the ridges below. The valley they had escaped was quiet now, littered with debris and the remnants of broken enemy lines. And yet, his mind kept replaying the moments when the sniper had struck with unerring precision, the rhythm of her shots dictating the team's every move. "She's gone," Ramirez whispered, voice trembling. "Just gone. How can someone be that perfect and disappear like that?" Harris nodded. "That's what makes her a ghost. She saved us, and we'll never know her name. Maybe she doesn't want to be known. Maybe she's done this before, and should do it again." Ortega, always practical, smirked despite exhaustion. "All I know is that if we meet her again, I'm saluting. She's earned it." Miller, the medic, simply shook his head. "I can't stop thinking about the way she moved, the way she controlled the battlefield. It wasn't just shooting, it was mastery. Pure mastery." Harris allowed himself a rare smile. They had survived against impossible odds, and the reason was simple yet unfathomable. Someone had appeared when death had been certain. She had orchestrated their survival with a fluid precision that was almost supernatural, vanishing before they could even comprehend the full measure of her skill. The Black Hawk touched down on the base's landing pad, rotors churning dust and debris into the evening air. The SEALs disembarked quickly, ensuring the informant was secure, and moved toward the debrief area. Command awaited, eager for details, unaware of the phantom who had made the impossible possible. Harris began recounting the ambush. Numbers, movements, enemy strategies. But every time he tried to describe the sniper, the officer's skepticism was palpable. An unidentified sniper? Alone? No intel, no record? One officer asked. "Yes," Harris replied firmly. "And she saved every one of us. That's the part you won't see on a report." Ramirez leaned closer to Harris, voice quiet. "We need to find her. I can't stop thinking about her. She's unforgettable." Harris shook his head. "Some ghosts aren't meant to be found. They appear, they do what needs to be done, and they disappear. We survived because of her. That's all that matters." The debrief concluded, and the team moved to rest. The informant, still pale and trembling, was taken to a secure location, while the SEALs cleaned weapons, patched minor injuries, and sat in quiet reflection. Outside, the mountains were darkening, the valley behind them swallowed by shadows. Ortega broke the silence. "You know what I keep thinking? She wasn't just a sniper. She was a guardian. A ghost guardian. And she chose us today." Harris exhaled slowly. "We might never know why, but that choice, that decision saved lives. That's her mark on history, even if no one ever records it." Ramirez's eyes were distant. "I'll never forget her. The way she moved, the way she fired. Like she knew exactly what was going to happen before it did." "Yes," Harris agreed. And that's the point. She wasn't just skilled. She was aware, methodical, untouchable. And she vanished before we could even reach her. That's the essence of a ghost. As night fell over the base, Harris looked out toward the mountains, tracing the ridges with his eyes. Somewhere up there, the sniper might still be moving, watching, protecting, ready to intervene in another impossible situation. The image of her, the slight frame, the long hair tucked under a ragged cap, the rifle steady, the calm breathing would remain etched in his mind forever. He realized the truth about the day. Survival wasn't just about training, skill, or strategy. It was about timing, about intervention, about a ghost who appeared at the exact moment they needed her. She had rewritten the odds, turning certain death into a victory, and then disappeared without recognition, leaving only the memory of her lethal grace. The SEALs gathered for a final moment before leaving the debriefing area. Ramirez, Ortega, and Miller exchanged looks, all unspoken words conveying the same thought. She had been perfect, flawless, untouchable, and gone. Harris finally spoke, voice low but resonant. Remember this. The valley, the ambush, the sniper, none of it would have ended the way it did without her. She's a ghost, yes, but she's also a savior. And in this world, sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones you'll never see. Outside, the wind rustled through the mountains. Harris imagined her silhouette among the rocks, moving like a shadow, every step precise, every shot perfect. She had chosen them, guided them, and saved them. And now, like all ghosts, she had vanished. Ortega broke the silence, a grin tugging at his face. I'm telling you, wherever she is, she's out there doing it again. Another impossible fight. Another group that owes her their lives. Harris nodded, eyes softening. And that's exactly where she belongs. Some ghosts aren't meant to be caught. They exist to protect, to intervene, and then to vanish. That's her purpose. That's why she's unforgettable. Ramirez spoke one last time, voice tinged with awe. I'll never forget her, ever. She's in every heartbeat, every memory of today. She saved us all. Harris allowed himself a rare moment of peace. They had survived, and the reason was clear. A phantom sniper, unseen, untouchable, perfect. She had appeared at the moment of their greatest need, orchestrated the battlefield, and vanished without acknowledgement. The SEALs had been witnesses to something extraordinary, a force of nature that defied explanation. And somewhere, above the ridges, in another valley, another impossible fight was waiting. And she would appear again. A ghost, a master, a savior. The SEALs left the base that night, exhausted but alive. Every one of them carried the memory of her, the rhythm of her shots, the precision of her movements, the calm assurance that had guided them through near-certain death. She would remain. A mystery, a phantom legend, a perfect ghost whose presence had changed the course of their lives forever. Harris looked up at the darkened mountains one last time before resting. Somewhere out there, she moved silently, rifle ready, unseen, untouchable, a guardian, a shadow, a ghost. And the world, or at least the SEALs who had survived that day, would never forget her. The valley was behind them. The enemy was gone. But the rhythm of her rifle, the presence of the ghost sniper, and the memory of her lethal grace would live forever in their minds. And as the night settled over the mountains, Harris knew one. Truth above all, heroes sometimes don't wear uniforms, and sometimes the ones who save lives are the ones you never see. The ghost had departed, leaving only survival, memory, and awe.